Every city tells a story. Sometimes that story is written in glass towers and freshly poured concrete. Sometimes it's written in spray paint in colors the city didn't choose, on walls, overpasses, tunnels, and the forgotten corners that developers haven't gotten to yet. Seattle is a city that is in the middle of its own story. One about who belongs here, who decides what beauty looks like, and whose voice gets to mark the landscape. This is a documentary about graffiti, but it's really a story about power. For years, Seattle's official response to graffiti has been aggressive. Under former Mayor Bruce Harrell, the city pursued one of its strictest postures yet, introducing legislation that raised fines and steepened penalties for graffiti artists caught in the act. The financial stakes are significant. In 2024 alone, the city of Seattle spent $6 million removing graffiti from public and private property. That cost is borne by all of Seattle's taxpayers, regardless of how they feel about what should be on those walls. But perhaps the most controversial piece of Seattle's graffiti enforcement isn't aimed at artists at all. Under the city's 1994 Graffiti Nuisance Ordinance, small business owners could be held financially responsible for graffiti that appears on their buildings, even when they had nothing to do with it. Cleanup costs and fines can land on a shop owner who was simply the nearest wall. For small, often minority-owned businesses, that burden can be devastating. Now, with Mayor Katie Wilson taking office, questions are mounting about whether Seattle's approach will shift, and what a more equitable path forward might look like. Graffiti has existed as long as human beings have had something to say and a surface to write on. Ancient civilizations carved woods into stone. Medieval travelers scratched their names into cathedral walls. Modern graffiti, as we know it, emerged from the streets of New York City in the late 1960s and 70s, born in communities that were being actively neglected, underfunded, and ignored. From the beginning, graffiti was a form of refusal, a refusal to be invisible. In Seattle, that tradition runs deep. The city's walls carry decades of accumulated voice, political statements, memorial pieces, intricate lettering, and full-scale murals that rival anything hanging in a gallery. Skate parks, highway overpasses, the tunnels beneath the city, these have become informal galleries, constantly evolving, constantly in conversation with whoever passes by. To understand Seattle's graffiti culture, you have to understand that it was never just about aesthetics, it was about the right to be seen. For decades, one theory has shaped how American cities, including Seattle, have approached graffiti, the broken windows theory. First proposed in 1982, it argues that visible signs of disorder, broken windows, litter, and graffiti signal that a neighborhood is vulnerable to crime, and that removing those signs prevents further decay. It sounds logical, but the research tells a different story. Study after study has showed that the broken windows theory fails, and that they find no meaningful causal link between graffiti and serious crime. What the broken windows theory has reliably produced, however, is something else: justification. Justification for aggressive policing in communities of color, justification for the removal of art that communities actually value, and justification for displacement, clearing out longtime residents to make way for development that would never been if possible if that neighborhood still felt rough. In city after city, the application of this theory has closely tracked with gentrification, and Seattle is no exception. Against this backdrop, organizations rooted in Seattle's communities have been doing something different. They've been insisting that art belongs to everyone, and that the walls of a neighborhood carry the memory of its people. Wanawari is a Black-centered arts organization based in Seattle's Central District, a neighborhood that experienced some of the most dramatic displacement in the city's recent history. The organization uses art, cultural programming, and home ownership as tools to preserve Black presence in neighborhoods that have been rapidly transformed by rising property values and development. For Wanawari, a mural on a wall is not vandalism. It is a testimony. It is a record that says, "We were here, and we are still here." 206 Zulu is Seattle's chapter of the Universal Zulu Nation, a global hip-hop organization that explicitly links graffiti, what practitioners call writing, to the broader culture of hip-hop and to the principles of community, knowledge, and social justice. Founded in the tradition of Africa's Bambatas movement in the South Bronx, 206 Zulu has long positioned writing as one of its four foundational elements of hip-hop: DJing, MCing, breaking, and graffiti. For this community, writing on a wall is not a crime. It is a cultural practice with a lineage. Both organizations challenge the idea that the only legitimate art is the art that power chooses to authorize. Seattle is changing faster than almost any city in America. New buildings rise where community spaces once stood. Old murals disappear overnight behind fresh coats of gray paint. And the people who created the culture that made these neighborhoods worth moving to in the first place are often the ones priced out. The debate over graffiti in Seattle is not really about property values or clean walls. It's about who gets to tell the story of this city, whose art is protected and whose is erased, whose presence is celebrated and whose is treated as a nuisance. The walls of Seattle are full of answers. You just have to slow down long enough to read them.